Hello, and welcome to the Storied Arcs and Tankobon coverage of Pluto. Today, we are tackling volumes 3 and 4, and I am here as one of your co-hosts, Mike, and I'm here with your co-hosts,
Alex.
And I'm Cole.
And if you heard last week, you know we've covered all the basic groundwork. We know how this interacts with the Astro Boy material. I think we're ready to dive straight in. Is there anything just right off the bat that you guys are just chomping at the bit here to talk about?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Adam's not dead, or rather, he is dead now, but he's not going to stay dead.
I had a massive Freudian slip in my note taking. I wrote Astro saves Uran, and I was like, nope, not Astro,
no, yeah.
Adam.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess there's a larger question too of which gets to the heart of the story here. If we say that Adam is dead, that does imply that at one point he was alive, which brings us to one of the main conflicts of the story of, is a robot alive? How do we think of them that way? How do people in the story think of them that way? Obviously, they referred to him on the news that he has died. The way it's covered it is as if, this robot lost its life. But then that takes you to the heart of the question of, is AI alive? Is robotics alive? Is something that man creates, can that be living? But I guess for ease of discussion, we can talk about him being dead, even though I think we're all pretty certain that he's not actually dead. That'd be a hell of a twist. It's like, yes, this is based on an Astro Boy comic, and then not even halfway through, he's going to be out of it. That'd be a bold take. I read enough comics, albeit in the Western genre, the Western market, to know that no one ever stays dead, especially not the main character.
I mean, I like Uran a lot. So if we want to kind of phase Adam out and maybe she becomes the hero of the story, I'm okay.
That would have been a killer twist. It would have been a killer.
It would be a stellar twist. That would be a good way to go. I wouldn't be against that. I'm just not betting on it.
Yeah, well,
their chances are slim.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it was about this point in reading that I learned that it was connected to Astro in some way. Like, I didn't know that when I picked up Pluto 1 and 2. I was just reading it and enjoying it for a story, and I was like, man, this is a lot of characters, and they drop them in pretty quickly. Like, I'm supposed to be somewhat familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I still believe it functions as an independent story because I still haven't read any Astro Boy.
I don't.
But I've Googled things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you have to know anything. Although I did like in that moment when he flies off to meet Uran and what was the dog's name? Was it Rocky or Bob?
There's a couple of Bobby. Yeah, it was
Bobby. The one dog.
Yep.
There's you do get that one kind of shot of him flying where I mean my reference is that he looks like Cannonball, the X-Men, where his body is flying, but like his legs basically just disappear into like propulsion, which is a very Astro Boy thing in terms of his legs become rockets or whatnot, and he's flying through. You get that little bit there of well, I'm assuming it's an intentional nod to that original Astro Boy, even though his body doesn't look as robotic as that original manga does. The visual of him flying through the air like that is very much kind of an old school callback. So, I think at that point, well, if you're for someone like me, if I hadn't known this was meant to be an Astro Boy thing, I would have seen that, and that would have been a trigger for me to say, oh, right, this is clearly, I would have thought an homage. I wouldn't have thought that this is, based off an actual story if had I not looked it up. But, I thought that was a nice little small, clever little Easter egg to throw back to people who are more familiar with the original source.
Yeah, well, and since we're talking about her, I think one of the things that his storytelling does, the way he's unfolding this particular story, is he does these little moments so well that make me like, I shouldn't feel any emotion when an old man, I'm like, okay, I learned he's a professor and he's trying to repair a robotic dog. And then the dog, he realizes he can't do it, and the dog is like limping its way to him, and he's like, oh, he's trying to play with me, and gets all teary-eyed. I'm like, stop it. I shouldn't feel anything from a character that I just met interacting with a robotic dog. But he takes time when he needs to zoom in on little moments like that. And with her, rescuing the robot, kind of living in a tunnel, and she refuels him. Yeah. And like, her empathy towards
the homeless guy, as it were.
Homeless guy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was going to call him a man. And then I was like, well, men don't like groggily wake up and request fuel. So safe to assume pretty early on there that he's a bot. And so I loved that storyline for her, which I think was just 1 or 2 chapters, but really kind of taught us a lot about her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was the one where, Adam was like, this is a really, really bad idea. You should not be going there.
Yeah.
And she's like, I trust my intuition. I trust my ability to read things and people. And I think more often than not, she's correct. Like, her read on stuff is better than everyone else's because that's her ability.
I think that specific couple chapters there, the way that was presented, I felt that both Adam and Euron were right.
Sure.
That neither came off as being wrong. And it was, he only became a danger really when Adam showed up, because that was his programming was to fight and, destroy Adam. So, she wasn't wrong to try to help him. And cause I think the point there I felt was to show, which I think ties into the revelation at the end of towards the end of volume 4, when they're talking about the meeting of the 3 scientists and talking about what AI can do. It felt like the idea of creating this ideal robot, this one that can help create and save the world. And we see what that guy can do. The idea of him controlling the weather, making plants grow, things like that. The idea, you get a sense of like, oh, this is someone this robot has the ability to do extraordinary things specific to the idea of restoring the planet. And by her helping him, we the readers see that. And then when Adam shows up, we see, oh wait, there's also the other side to him. There's this homicidal side. So we get both those characters in that way. Both Euron and Adam are shown in opposition to each other. But neither of them they're both proven correct. That yes, helping this guy was right, helping this robot was right, because there's something special about him and he was in need. But also, whether it's his fault or not, his motivation or not, he's also a danger. He's also something that's something that you should be afraid of. So, showing both sides of that, but really putting the time in. I think that is something that I came across really in these 2 volumes that I got out of it, was that you mentioned, Mike, there's a lot of characters, a lot of storylines, a lot of places, a lot of settings. But
lots of professors,
lots
of scientists.
Yeah, but Urasawa, he spends time, he puts the work in, and it made us be like what ultimately comes to maybe like 2 or 3 pages of just panels there. But showing Euron going back and over to this guy, helping this guy out, being alone with this guy and seeing what he sees. You mentioned the professor with the dog, trying to fix the dog. Like, how many panels were there of him just working on it,
right,
over and over and over again? So you see the effort that he is putting into it, which then, so when he's unable to fully fix the dog, and you had that moment where it's still alive, it's still moving, trying to play, trying to be a dog. You have a couple pages there. You saw the work that he put into it, and then ultimately not be able to succeed. Urasawa is taking the time to flesh all those stories out, so we can connect with the reader. So you can,
right. So those, but that's a way to teach us about his character, and then you realize that was all a ploy by Goji, because he knows this professor, and he's like, oh yeah, I could totally get him with a dying robot dog. And that's when it becomes great plotting too. It's not it's not just that he
not just for the audience,
right?
No.
But we built that character and are able to
right. Yeah. So there's the idea of him. I think what I like is that what Urasawa has done is he's taking time to do these character moments, because he knows it's more than just a character moment. It does feed back into the plot, but the idea that he can spend a couple of pages here and there, reinforce what he's trying to get across there. And a lot of times it's done with very little dialogue. Like I said, the professor working on the dog was just him like sitting at a workbench, different angles, but you get the sense of time and the amount of effort he puts into it. So the fact that he's, and I guess this probably comes with the idea of taking an original story and expanding on it, giving yourself more room to tell the story, to flesh out and fill out the world and all the characters in it. And again, Mike, you and I haven't read the original, but I have to imagine these are beats that Urasawa is putting in because he wants a fuller world. He wants a fuller story.
At the same time, I think it would have been so easy for him to commit the opposite error and take the characters for granted. Like, oh, everybody knows who this is.
Yeah.
I don't need to spend any time getting to know them.
Yeah.
I just love that he didn't do that.
Or he could have taken the expansion of a story in a different direction, and almost like world build just for the sake of world building, kind of like Tolkien style. Like we're going to talk about this bush here for 20 pages or something. I like that he has focused that on character. And he's not afraid to jump away from our main characters and give us something entirely new. Like we talked last week, we got, 3 chapters with North number 2. Is that what it was?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, in this story, we follow,
Adolf.
Adolf. There's a lot of incredibly subtle, metaphors in this, in this couple volumes
so
here.
Subtle.
I was gonna say that's one of my notes I have is that the political kind of the more political stuff in this is very, very on the nose. Even in the first couple volumes, I think they call them like robots of mass destruction.
Yeah.
They don't really hide it. Here we have the literal KKK and we have Adolf. He's got the Hitler haircut going too.
He didn't give him the mustache though. I was shocked at the restraint to not give him the mustache too.
Well, I assume like this is like a Adolf origin story, so I think he'll end with a mustache, or maybe he'll just smash his lip on an inkwell or something.
Yeah. Well, no, Cole mentioned that, and it was obviously we talked about it last week. The idea of the that Central Asian conflict is a not even thinly veiled, 1-to-1 of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, things of that nature, and obviously the 2 leaders are depicted. Darius is he's clearly Saddam Hussein. The president is clearly George W. Bush. The American president, or whatever they call America in the story, the one that's being controlled by the little teddy bear robot, or manipulated by. It's so very, very obvious. And then here we get even a more obvious thing, as you mentioned, the KKK or the KR or whatever it's called here, but they do specifically mention the KKK. As being a similar thing, and I
in case it was too subtle.
Yeah, no,
I know we were all prone to miss that KKK connection with the white hoods and
what I was struck with though is how American centric the story is, but in very specific ways. And I guess this is I obviously the U.S. invasion of Iraq was a big deal. I'm sure that's worldwide global news, but like. Is the idea of the KKK really something that is pervasive? Like, I wonder if that symbology, that visual, which is so stark in America, you see it here, doesn't matter where you are, you know what it is. Like, does that translate around the world?
That was the question I had too, is kind of how obvious that is to their, primarily Japanese readership,
exactly.
right? Like,
yeah.
So,
and even just there's the visual, and when the one character references, although like the KKK, does that land with, I said, a mostly Japanese or at least initially Japanese audience? I was curious about that. I mean,
I think this is probably not as far removed, but there is the 5 Orange Pips, which is one of the short stories for Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, 19th century, and one of the key plot points in there is the KKK in America. Those 3 letters appear, and Sherlock, of course, knows what the KKK is, what they're about. Thus, either the implication was we're informing British readers about this thing, or we all know globally what the KKK is. But I agree. I think there's a substantial difference between 19th century Brits knowing about the KKK and young Japanese readers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you see that a lot, Cole, in mangas that are set in or effectively our world or a version of our world, where there are allusions to let's say specifically America and American either pop culture or just history, in terms of not just referencing that, but also maybe like how they're viewed by someone who's not from here. Like there's not saying you have to give nuance to the KKK, but like there clearly isn't any in what we're depicting here. We're getting the most, the way any like Hollywood depiction of the KKK would be. Just like these guys are flat out villains. They're discriminatory. Like these are the bad guys. Even though we get the one guy who, because his life's in danger, they turned on him. He's kind of coming around. But do you see that a lot in let's in again? I want to say like any mangas that are set in our world, like having these kind of references to other cultures, specifically in America.
I'm trying to think like the way American like culture, I guess, is referenced a lot is either like very obvious pop culture beats. So like there's a series that's really big, My Hero Academia, that's it's all about superheroes.
Yeah,
there's a ton of allusions to just like traditional Western comics there. There is a good one. There's a Death Note one shot that was released maybe a few years ago.
Straight up has Trump in it.
Yeah, it's basically just Donald Trump. So it's like that's pretty hilarious. It's like, oh, they, the way they sort of think about him is not that different from the way he's, like portrayed here in normal media too. So it is interesting kind of what they pick and choose. And even Death Note also, there's a whole kind of stretch where they're dealing with like, I guess like these mafia or like mobster kind of people, but the way they all dress and act and stuff is very much like, oh, like you only are sort of aware of this from watching a movie, or it's a lot of it you can tell it's like you're familiar with some of this stuff because of how it's depicted in like media.
You've seen The Sopranos or you've seen The Godfather. This is how you think America. Okay,
and that's how cops talk. And which to be fair, I think Americans also get informed by those things.
Sure,
like the way we think of the mafia of Cosa Nostra or whatever is because we've all seen The Godfather. And even The Sopranos, like they reference the Godfather exists in the world of The Sopranos, so like that there's kind of a feedback loop there. But that's interesting that you in your answer there, Cole, because I always wonder about that when we're talking about media made, knowing this it'll go around the world, but the idea of what your intended audience or initial audience is when they depict, like say, American culture or whatnot. Is it just the same? Is it a reflection of what our media is that we put out there, or is it meant to be a deeper commentary, or is it just like, hey, at least in this case, like we know these are the bad guys, and we know that like if you know what the KKK is outside the States, you understand their connection. You know what that denotes, that it automatically registers as hatred and evil, and that's a shorthand.
In the same way that a German-looking guy named Adolf.
Yeah.
Obviously, a much smaller scale, but
they doubled down. They're like, we need to make sure these guys are both Nazis and KKK. Of course, that Venn diagram is pretty much a circle anyway, at least in this country. But still, it felt a little hat on hattish. Like we're gonna make sure everything we have on here, but it is the kind of thing, though. We can comment on how obvious it is, but it's another side to what Urasawa is trying to build in this world, though, right? This, we saw some of the anti-robot sentiment before, and the natural progression is, there would be some sort of secret underground society that is hell bent on their removal. Like that's right. The
and I think you also have to consider, like, there are younger readers that aren't going to be as savvy. They're not going to pick up on little subtleties. Sure. So maybe you just have to draw things out one or two more beats than an adult would need. just to make sure everybody's along for the ride. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't think that's gilding the lily necessarily.
No, I'm not saying he shouldn't have done it. Maybe my commentary is as an older reader, when you see a guy named Adolf and he's in a white pointy hat and robe, you're like, that's a little much there, But you're not wrong on that, Mike. I don't think. Yeah,
I think it does a good job of it makes it very obvious the way that like Urasawa wants you to see this kind of this like anti-robot group, because prior to like you see them in these white hoods, this guy's named Adolf, you're like, okay, these guys are clearly bad. Yeah. Whereas before that, it's like, there's kind of this anti-robot sentiment. It's like, well, maybe there's an aspect to the story. It's like, maybe the robots should, maybe they are bad for society, right? Like maybe they are causing problems. Maybe we don't need the robots. And this is very much like here you go. Like, I want these people to very obviously be the villain, and I think there's kind of something to be said for that too.
That is true. The first couple of volumes, there were little shades of just like, you're uncomfortable around them. It's actually something that, Mike and I, we talked about a little bit when we talked about Not All Robots. Cole, this is a book that we discussed. It's a satire. I mean, you can tell by the name, Not All Robots, kind of what the idea is, but this idea of robots replacing humans in the workforce, and then those robots getting replaced by newer, shinier, nicer robots. In the workplace, and again, it's a satire on our world and our look at it. But there are those similar kinds of ideas of like, there are people who look at them in shades of gray. Like, is this good? Maybe, but there are, just because they're helping society doesn't mean everything about them is good. Maybe, and you have some room for some debate and some discussion. But yeah, you're right though, Colt. It's when you have the KO, we have the guys in the hoods. It's trying to make it very obvious that regardless of what you saw before, like, these are the bad guys. No matter what they do, no matter what their motivations are, whatever what we see them do, these guys are evil. These guys are the bad dudes, and there's no ambiguity on that.
Yeah, well, and I think there is a little bit more subtlety to Adolf than he's just bad because he's bad. The fact that we get like the backstory of how his dad died, not a great guy, trying to do the best by his kids, but just not a good person. Yeah. And then, we see him very uncomfortable with his brother's take on stuff, but still kind of has that blind loyalty of like, well, he is my brother. So.
And there's this ongoing thing, at least as where I am right now, this whole thing of like these are bad people. The people they can't, like, these guys are the worst. These guys are evil, and they're like, but dude, your brother, boy,
they all agree.
Yeah,
like,
so
we're kind of addition by subtraction.
Yeah. So this idea that again, I've only read through the end of book 4 here, so I can't spoil any of the listeners anything before there. But the fact that it comes up like seemingly every third page with Adolf, whenever he's talking to anybody, there's someone who's always just like, oh yeah, by the way, your brother, yeah, what that guy did, oh boy, that no matter what Adolf has done, no matter what people around him are like, there's always someone being like, yeah, but your brother, man. And even I guess Adolf himself says it too. He's like, I know my brother wasn't a good man. Like, I'm not saying he deserved to die, not saying that, but like, maybe not so sad that he's not around, but still, there's a caveat there because he is his brother. But there's this cloud of like, what that guy did was so far out of field. He was so out of pocket on that even the KKK is like, dude, like, your reputation in our group of terrible people is stained because of what your brother did. And so I find that interesting in terms of like, what could that be? And again, I'm not going to spoil anybody, and I'm not going to have Cole or Mike say anything to me either. This idea of like, there's Chekhov's gun, and then there's whatever this is, because it's been mentioned so many times. It feels like, not that it's going to be like some major revelation in terms of how heinous it was, but I do feel like it's going to be something important. So I guess we'll to see about that as we go forward. But it's notable to me how often it is mentioned, and what everyone else's reaction, or really not everyone else's, but what everyone's reaction is to it, because we've already seen what Adolf's feelings are to his brother. But like when we see other people in the group there, when we see the cops who are interrogating him after his car blows up, like everybody's got a take on this dude. And it's like the one thing they all agree on, that his brother, that Adolf's brother was like whatever he did was the worst thing ever.
Yeah,
like,
no,
that's like
universal. When the clan
agreement.
looks at a guy and they're like, "Come on, this guy's making us look bad." That's when you've crossed the line.
Yeah, you've gone too far there. So,
like, if you're looking for the line, look behind you. It's several hundred yards behind you. Cole, is there any character beat or chapter or anything particular you wanted to talk about?
One of the things that I'm kind of continually fascinated with this manga is the kind of the pacing and the rhythm of it. Like I said, a lot of manga that we read on our show has the tendency to kind of get a little too in the weeds or drag at times, just like very sluggish. And this is one that could easily do that, but it's not. It's so quick. And I think Urasawa is also very good at doing this thing where it feels like every volume feels like it's the penultimate volume. Like, even after reading volume 4, it's like, oh, well, you could end it in volume 5 if you wanted to, but he kind of keeps stringing you along, but not in a way that's frustrating or annoying. So I think just like his ability to kind of craft this and, like I said, make this story that is kind of like at its core very dense, just like extremely breezy and easy to go through. Because a lot of manga artists cannot do that. They have not shown the ability to write like that.
I gotta say, I think that's a great observation that I can tell. And again, reading this as someone who has focused on Western comics, that idea of pacing, and when you feel like maybe you're getting like the worst thing, I think, when reading sequential art, whether it's in volumes like this or single issues in the US market, is when you start reading an issue and you're into the story and it feels like it as you're reading it, it feels unnecessary. You're like, oh, this is like what's this issue about? Like, what are we doing here? Is this a filler? Is this important? And then maybe 5 issues later, it ties together. You're like, oh, great. Look how clever he was. It made sense. But in the moment when you're reading it, it feels like, oh, like why is this important? Because the creators, the authors there, they haven't made it feel important in the moment, So it's almost immaterial if it all feels important at the end. Like that just feels like an exercise in the creators being clever. Like, hey, look at all these disparate things that tied in and it all worked out. But when you're not engaged as you're reading it for the first time, I think that's a failure of storytelling. And what I found so far is every time he jumps away from, I guess, the main story, right, which is following Gazit and his whether it's his journey, whether it's specifically on this serial killer beat or whatnot, or just his just him navigating through what these nightmares are and all that. Anytime we jump away from that, I don't feel like we've lost the thread at all. And I think that goes back to those 3 issues, those 3 chapters with North number 2, because that was so well done. You start out, you're like, I don't know what's going on here, but he makes you engaged in that story. And then of course he rips you right out of that. But like, you get that bit of a detour, and it's like you're on a side story that does tie in very quickly, but he's able to get you engaged with these other characters and make you care about them. So as I'm reading through now, and we jump to the story with Adolf, or we follow Yurnon, who we just got introduced to, who she was on the last page basically of volume 2. So we haven't spent any time with her, and getting a little more time with her and seeing what she's able to do. Having Adam basically not be in here, like Adam being he's like literally a nagging older brother in a couple of chapters, and then he comes into a big fight and then he dies. We don't see Gazit for several chapters at all, and none of that feels out of place to me as I'm reading. I'm not missing anything, because I feel like all these parts are, not that I can see the whole tapestry, I can't see the whole thing all at once, but everything feels of a piece and nothing feels wasted. And I think that's a testament, I think, to Urasawa's skill as a storyteller, as you were saying, Cole. It's just that any direction he wants to take this, I have yet to feel like anything is a waste of my time. No matter which direction he goes, no matter what path he takes to his story to get back to his main story, I feel engaged. And as a reader, that's something that I wholly appreciate, especially having read so many stories that wander off and don't have that feeling. So when I get to one like that,
but it's an earned trust at this point.
It is. Yeah.
He put the work in from the get-go. He got me attached to Gazik and then immediately yanked me away from that for North number 2, got me attached to him, came back to Gazik, and then next time we leave Gazik, I trust him because the North number 2 story was great.
Exactly.
And then he continues to surprise and delight you each time he introduces a character. I think the one wrestler guy who died, he got a good treatment, but not nearly as in depth as North number 2. And so that one felt maybe like a tad rushed in hindsight. But also, I'm not sure what else there was to say about him other than he had a family.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Cole. No.
I was going to say, I think that's almost a little bit of the point of his. Was that Brando? Or...
I was going to say Brando, and I was like, I think I'm putting too many letters in.
One of the two.
It was. Well, I saw it as Brando. Yeah, Hercules is the one who's still alive. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I think part of the point of him almost was because he is a little bit different than the other robots, right? He's a little more, we'll say, like hot-headed, I guess. So I think that's kind of it works with his character also, where he's kind of going out in the blaze of glory a little bit, right? He's rushing into the fight, and I think he's also the one too. Back when they are, in volume 2, maybe when they're kind of talking about the war, he's the one that comes up. He's like, well, I had 2,187 kills exactly, right? Like, I think this is kind of his vibe. So maybe we don't get to spend as much time with him, but it almost works. Like his whole sort of persona and character is rushed, right? He's always kind of moving.
Yeah, but also I think with when you look at him and with North number 2, we spent time with North number 2 because that robot was on a journey to get somewhere. I think with Brando, the idea was when Gazik gets to him, like, he's pretty content. Like, I found happiness in his family. So he's not on a journey. We catch him at the end of his journey. And so when he goes and he fights Pluto and he makes a sacrifice, it's like we didn't need to see him get to where he's at because we met him there and we already understand that in a short time with him, this guy wrestles. Okay, he's great. And he's got a family, he's got a bunch of kids, and that's what he cares about. And that's kind of what he's doing this for. He didn't have to go on a journey. It was like, I think for Gazik, it was to see like, this is what the end could, or this is a possible end, because I think at some point he talks to him about, do you have children or anything like that? And Gazik's like, no. And so it's almost like showing him, this is what the end could be. You could reach this level of happiness and contentment. And yes, in the end, he goes out in this blaze of glory, but that is consistent with what we saw in that he felt he had to do this. It's the idea of like, you can't go out there thinking you're saving the world. I'm trying to save my family and that's it. That's only thing on his mind was, I got to stop this guy because if I do that, my family's safe. And if so be it, the whole world is saved, great. But his motivation was just his wife and his kids. And there was nothing else for him nowhere else for him to go in that way. So as you're saying, Mike, there's not much more character exploration we could have gotten out of him. Because I think the point was we're just showing a guy who's at the end, who's found what he needs. And I think we're left with other robots. Like there's Hercules still who wants to keep fighting. And now that he's not, he's a little bit lost. He wanted to do something very similar to what Brando did, right? He in this volume, we see that he also, quote unquote, steals a military mech and and wants to go out and fight the same way that Brando did. But it's the Australian robot. It was Epsilon. Yeah. She comes in and stops him. So you see Hercules is a little lost now because he's trying to find that motivation. He's on a journey now. And then we have Epsilon, who is, I guess she was the conscientious objector, right? That was kind of her role in the war. didn't fight at all.
Right.
Yeah. So, but the characters we're left with are the ones that are still on a journey that we're every time we go back to, I think we see a little bit more and more out of them.
Yeah. I was going to say one more thing about Brando, and I'm debating because I'm like, technically that's last episode.
That's all right.
But I do think the one beautiful payoff he got was we realized in that conversation, they're all, kind of traumatized about their war experiences, and he's totally cool with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was part of his rationale of like, I don't want my friends to have to do any more killing. It really bothers them. I will square off against this threat. And I think that's the most positive spin I can give to his character, kind of saying, I'm going to go out and fight this thing on my own because they don't like this. They don't want this. They're not proud of killing. And I chose to keep fighting for a living even after I finished being in combat.
Well, so, and I think Hercules feels the same way about that, where he's left now, and we saw that we saw that in this volume where it was clear he was trying to do the same thing that Brando did. He was going to go and I'm going to go take this on. I'm going to go fight, get this mech ready for me so I can go do it. And he would have done that had Epsilon not stopped him, but it's that same kind of idea of I'm going to take on this burden, right? I'm going to do this because I know I'm the only one who can, or I'm the only one who can handle it. It's a selfish act of selflessness, kind of, like the idea that it's that kind of that martyr complex, this idea of like, I'm the only one that can do this. It all comes down to me. But in your mind, you're thinking, oh, I'm doing this for everybody else.
Sure.
So
and I think that's
you straddle that
slightly
line.
more cynical way to read it, which is probably not false. But I was like, if we want to say he gave, Brando as good of treatment as he gave everybody else, that's at least a layer. Whether it's a positive layer or a negative layer, it is a layer.
Well, I'm not saying it's negative necessarily. I'm just saying that when you try to break down and psychoanalyze that kind of mindset, the idea of I'm the only person that can do this, or I'm going to do this for someone else. There's a selfishness to that and thinking that you're the only one that can do it. Even if your motivation is pure of like, I'm doing this to help somebody else. I'm doing this so you don't have to, there's a presumption there that the person you're doing this for can't, or doesn't want to, or can't handle it, So I think they're, I'm not saying it's a negative. I'm saying that it straddles that line there that there's a bit of a martyr complex there that I think most of these robots have, because they are these super advanced, the 7 most advanced robots in the world or whatever. The idea that we can do things that not only other humans can't do, but other robots can't do. We're the only ones that can do this. And that's kind of been drilled into them, into their program. They're hardwired into believing that because they're not wrong, right? Like they're
right. And it could be, it could be the old Peter Parkerism, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
And they see,
exactly. Yeah.
We have more power than anyone else. Therefore,
yes,
we have to put up with the insults.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We also receive the praise, but because of that, we have a greater burden to serve, which is, I think, a good way to be about it. The one character that we meet really early on in volume 3, possibly, I think in the chapter 16, is Professor Abra, who I think we find out quite a bit more about him pretty quickly, but his mere existence, Epsilon is, I believe it's Epsilon who says, humans and robots shouldn't really try to get any closer to each other because the line's getting blurry, and that's not a good thing.
That's one of the, I think the first appearance or when we see, right. That's one of the first things they say, right? Yeah.
Which, is why she would explain why she's so recluse and withdrawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we see, Abra himself is the mind of a human, but mostly a robotic body now, to the point where like robots read him as a robot. Humans already knew him as a human. Adam is like, I don't know what that dude is. Like, I just, stared at him for a few seconds and he kind of stumped me. And he kind of embodies that oh, it's gone too far of crossing, humans and robots. And obviously that is his intent with the robots he creates as well, is, give them human bodies and, dare I say, he's pushing them toward human emotions, which I think both sides of the conflict agree that's what we don't want, is humans and robots being so entwined that they're indistinguishable. Because as I understand it, it's not good for humans if robots have all of this ability and they're smarter than us and they feel like we feel we have nothing left over them.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the
if
the
they
human
can create
alarmist
art
side.
and music and all the stuff North 2 is going for. I think that's a devastating blow for humanity. That's also like a real scarcity mentality and a real negative way to view it. I have not reached the end of this story yet. I doubt there will be a resolution ultimately. Like, I don't think it's going to have a final take to say, like, here's the correct view of balancing humans and robots in the world. I think it will keep wrestling with this theme, but I don't expect them to put a bow on it. What do you guys have any thoughts on that?
That's what I think. That's what I suspect too. Because, like I said, I've only read 3 total volumes of Astro Boy, but that is, kind of this difference between robots and humans. This kind of fight between like these kind of anti-robot people. The laws that we're putting against robots, all that sort of thing is very much. I mean, it's the core of every single one of those volumes. So I suspect that. It would be nice almost if Pluto does leave it pretty ambiguous like that, as like, hey, whatever, the story of Pluto is wrapped up, but there is still kind of work to be done in this world, in this society. I think that would kind of match what goes on with, or what stays under the surface of Astro Boy the entire time too.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. That's where I'd like the story to go. If everything were to wrap up super, super nicely, the story is the story, but if the larger world, the larger questions all wrap up real nicely and be like, ta-da, that's the end, that would feel.
It would feel like we're telling the last Astro Boy story ever.
Yeah, yeah. It would feel disingenuous to the world and the story that he's already built if the end of this story is the end of these larger issues, as opposed to the idea of what I would kind of hope the story gets with is just further understanding and asking the right questions and working towards a better answer and a better world, as opposed to just wrapping up and being like, yeah, we're there, and it probably that would feel like a magical fairy tale ending, and that doesn't seem consistent with what we're seeing so far.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I like the idea.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just saying, I like the idea too of it. The story could end and still leave you with like, oh, there's clearly a lot more here to the Astro Boy world, right? Like,
oh yeah, definitely.
There's an entire Astro Boy KKK that is touched on in Pluto, but maybe that's not wrapped up, right?
Yeah.
So it's well, let me go check out Astro Boy because I want to see, like there's all this other conflict that gets mentioned in Pluto but isn't resolved. So like let's go read these 23 Astro Boy volumes and see what's going on.
That this story can wrap up. This story needs to wrap up, but that doesn't mean the whole world is done. That there are other things that maybe it leaves you with. Here's what the next story could be, or other stories could be, because the world still exists, and it's that the world is that full and that kind of robust. It can support more than just this individual narrative. Absolutely, I think that, and I think we see that in terms of what he's building, because Urasawa has put that time in to build out this world and these other characters, whether they're secondary or tertiary or whatnot. Just knowing that the world is populated and we're seeing all these different places, all these different countries that we're in various parts of the world. That they're, when this story is over, you have to think that. You would want to think, well, what's the next story in this world? Whether it's an Astro Boy, an Atom story or not, whether it's based on anything else, you would want to still be in that world. And I can see that definitely being the case when you get to the end of being like, well, that was a good story. What's the next one in this world? For me, I know that when I get that feeling out of a story, that's when I know, I think I want to say got my money's worth, but where it was fulfilling to read, where if that narrative is done and I want to stay in that world. And I get the sense that because of what we're seeing here, some of these other side stories, I don't know how they all tie in the end, but I'd like to know more about this world, more about its history, more about some of these other characters. I said, and I'm only halfway through. So no, I'm looking forward to that when I get to the end of seeing that, if that feeling continues.
Yeah. There are a couple characters at this point we still haven't mentioned, and just want to drop them in there. So by volume 3, not having read the greatest robot in the world, I'm like, okay, who is this killer? Surely we got to get like a cutscene to the killer or something like that. So when Ron, or whatever her name is meeting with the man under the bridge, I was like, oh, that's him. It's Pluto. And he seems nice. So I'm like, he clearly has some ultra personality that takes over, something like that. And then you meet the guy, with all the bugs coming out of his mouth. And I was like, oh, that's Pluto. And it's like, the story I don't think is trying to make you guess, because I think the story assumes you're an Astro Boy fan, so you know who the killer is. So it's not about the reveal necessarily. But we haven't mentioned the bug guy, who I don't think we get a name for. We haven't done much with the men under the bridge. And then 2 times in these books, we get someone having a horrifying vision of Bora.
Yeah.
That big shadowy thing. And then they get that look of panic in their eyes, and they just barely mutter out Bora. And that's usually the end of the chapter. Yeah. So any thoughts on that whole underbelly of, we're starting to see the killer, we're starting to see the conspiratorial side that's working against our detectives.
And we get the reveal, I guess the reveal, quote unquote, of Pluto, and get the sense that obviously he's something different about him, that he can, I guess, move from body to body or consciousness to consciousness. Like he can, he was trapped, or he was in that homeless guy under the bridge there. And then, was only revealed, I guess, when he kind of went into a rage when he saw Adam there, but he was able to basically leave that body. And so maybe the idea that he can, what do they call it? Like soul. I think there's a phrase for it there, but he can hop bodies back and forth. And we get a sense that of maybe who's behind him. We got that bug guy who I guess is really just like surveillance. Like he's the guy you send out to find people that I guess all the bugs can, I
assume they're actually robotic bugs network.
Yeah. But they go and do recon and stuff and come back. He seems to be kind of a henchman there, but you might, and then this vision of Bora or that sound is, we get that again, name checked, the Bora investigation, everyone who was involved with that specific committee or whatever it was, those are the people that are being targeted and being killed. So that seems to be some sort of linchpin here of whatever happened in the past is anyone linked to that specifically is a target right now, human and or robot or whatever. So yeah, I think it's just, that's more just kind of sprinkling these things in that Urasawa is doing, that the reader can latch onto, and by doing it, by going back to it over and over again, having a couple of those visions there, dropping the name first as like a sound effect, and then someone's reaction, and then you name check it again, like Bora is an official thing, like the Bora investigation. Again, it just reinforces that, like, hey, these are things you need to pay attention to. And maybe it's not the most subtle way of doing it, but again, it's about, I think making his intention clear of, we don't know what this is yet. We don't know what it's going to mean yet, but pay attention to this is going to be important, so you don't feel blindsided when you do get to the end. Like he's making it very clear what the breadcrumb trail is, and I don't think that takes away from the storytelling, because he's not spoiling what the ending is going to be. He's just saying, hey, be sure to pay attention to this stuff. He's not forcing the audience to have to be clever on their own. You can speculate on what Bora is and what that means, but which maybe he wants you to do that, but there's no ambiguity as to that. Whatever Bora is important. He's taking that part out of it. He's making sure you focus on that, and then allowing you to speculate on whatever the hell that could mean down the line.
One of the things that I really have liked too, because we've started to get a little more introduction into Pluto like itself,
Yeah.
which in Astro Boy, Pluto is always sort of he has like two kind of big I guess like character points to it, which one is that it's always referred to as like this kind of force of nature. Like it always, every time it enters the scene, it comes in as like a giant tornado. And that's really shown here. I think it's chapter maybe 26, where, Astro or Adam goes and kind of fights this giant tornado hurricane thing. I think Urasawa does a really great job of like kind of bringing that out of his like, really playing up the force of nature aspect of it that Tezuka had originally put into the story. And then the other part is that Pluto, sort of whether it wants to or not, it kind of has to fight these other 7 robots. Like there's a bunch of times that in the original arc or the original story where it doesn't necessarily want to have to fight Astro Boy or whoever. And they'll ask, they're like, well, why do you have to fight me? He's like, because that's what that's what I'm programmed to do. They kind of keeps repeating that, and that's shown in that part where when Adam shows up and the guy just kind of goes berserk, the dude under the bridge or whatever he's drawing. So I like how Urasawa has been able to bring out these parts of Pluto without Pluto being as like as much of a staple character as it is in Astro Boy. Like in the Astro Boy arc, Pluto is in every single chapter, basically. Like from chapter 1 what it is, what it looks like, what it's doing, and here it's a little more ambiguous, but still keeps these like core character traits.
That's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that, the idea of in the original that Pluto is this, it's less about what his wants and desires are, and he's just programmed to do what he does. Mm-hmm. And so to get that representation in that little mini story with Uran and the guy under the bridge, and the idea that he has other sides to him, this idea of creation and what he can do. But something in him, a switch flips when he sees Adam that he has clearly no control over. And so to know that was something that Urasawa didn't just make up, but actually was able to expand on from the original. I think that's really cool. That I like knowing what that connection is to the original. That it's more that he took the idea of just, well, I'm reluctantly doing this, to almost being like, I have no idea I want to do this until I have to. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. That basically covers all my notes. I
do have a question, actually.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say is
at the very end, at the end of volume 4, the end of volume 4, which is chapter 31, and in that chapter and a couple before, I mentioned earlier, there was this big conference between the 3 major scientists, right? The 3 that all had some major breakthrough with the robotics in their country. And we're introduced to Dr. Tenma, right? And every time we see him, he is, in these meetings, he's always in his face in shadow, everything like that. He's obscured, and he's the one who is kind of parroting the idea of like, we shouldn't make robots any more human. There's no perfect. The perfect AI is like, comes from. I can't, the line right in front of me here, but basically the idea of like misery, hatred, things like all these negative things come from a perfect AI and all that. And that the idea of pooling their resources to make the perfect robot is kind of folly. But I get to the end of this chapter in this volume, and I forget all that because apparently Dr. Tenma is like hipster Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, it's a good look. It's a good look.
I don't know what else to say. He might as well have been wearing a stovepipe hat as well. I don't know. I don't know if that was the intent, but so far almost all.
It's
these
hard
volumes,
not to read that when you have like basically a Hitler stand-in, a KKK stand-in, and then you get somebody who looks like Abraham Lincoln, which is not a common look.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. And especially since some of these volumes have ended on a large panel like that of reveal, whether it's Adam, Uran, or whatever, Pluto, and now it's, again, I'm sorry, it's Abraham Lincoln. I don't know if that was the intent or if I'm supposed to read anything into that. in terms of what his place is in American society history. But everything he said before went out the window for me, because I'm like, why is Abraham Lincoln in this story? So I don't know if that had an effect on anybody else, but I saw that, and everything he had said before about AI and robotics just went out the window, because that's all I could see.
Yeah. The other thing that I forgot to mention, which I'm embarrassed of, is this incredible twist where Gazik gets assigned to be the protector of of the guy who's hunting him. And it's just like, I don't know why that I didn't like see that coming at all, but it totally got me. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's so good. And Adolf badly wants to kill him, but knows Gazik is the only one who can keep him and his family safe. And now the death order is out from the KKK to just kill both of them, just make it a clean job. And he's still being given instructions to kill Gazik. Even he cleans that, he absolutely wrecks that cleaning bot in the rest area. And
I'm guessing not a lot of weapons on the cleaning bot.
No, but it was mental taunting, basically.
It was.
And it just shows you like, this guy will throw anyone under the bus to cover himself. Which is actually
really curious, though. So that goes back to like, what is the reach of this KKK? That they can.
Hilarious that they're using bots to deliver messages.
And like, that's
extremely. Yeah,
that's exactly where I was going with this. This idea of like, what is their reach and what's their influence? The fact that they would use a robot in order to deliver this message. Again, what does that say about them? I think there's a larger thing about their pathology and ideology buried in there. But still, it is. Yeah, I mean, that what we see with Adolf and Gazit there is that's a pretty common story trope there, right? Like the guy who hates the thing and he's got to protect him. And how many times does Gazit to say like, this is my job, this is my assignment, so I'm doing it, and he picks up right away that he hates robots. Like immediately he calls him out on that, and it doesn't deter him, because obviously it's not the first time he's ever heard that or experienced that. But yeah, throwing those two together, after everything we've seen from Adolf so far, and his specific beef against Gazit because he thinks that he killed his brother, and that's obviously where we leave between the two of them. At the end of volume 4 is in that rest stop bathroom after Adolf has destroyed this cleaning bot because of the message he got, and then Gazit coming in and stopping him and maybe using a little too much force or whatever to pull him off and break up that fight. We leave them in this volume with Adolf accusing him of killing his brother, and then we end on that one shot of Gazit, and then we cut back to hipster Abe Lincoln at the end to finish off the chapter there. But so we're following our main character there. We leave him in an interesting spot there, where now he's being confronted by, again, this man who hates him because of something he thinks that Gazit did, that as far as we know right now, Gazit didn't do. But also we know that there are gaps in his memory, and we see some of that there. They allude back to that earlier too. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's Hoffman, right? Dr. Hoffman, the doctor that made him and does his maintenance. We see what I guess are some flashbacks of like things that Dr. Hoffman is dealing with, of like just run maintenance on him, blah, 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 things like that. And I can't help but tie that back to this idea that Gazit may have some gap in his memory, even though he's being told he's fine, there's no problems, you're all good, but that there maybe is this error from 3 years ago that isn't there now. And how do all these things connect? And it seems like we're placing more blocks into that building that's being built, the story that's coming together, that these things that seem disparate are now maybe starting to merge.
Well, Gazit definitely believes that.
Well, that is true. That's true. Yeah,
and so it's one of those things where it's like,
if
even if it weren't true,
we're following along with our main character. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Even if it weren't true, he's haunted by this, and anyone who teases him from, all you have to say to him is something about, 500 Zeus, and he's going to lock up because he doesn't know what you're talking about, but he knows, like he knows
It's something.
He knows roughly what the gap is. He dreads what it might be, and he badly wants to know.
Yeah.
And I think he knows it's not going to be good. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm glad I found that out.
He didn't bad. He didn't lose vacation memories.
Right.
Yeah.
Where they wholly overcompensation with the pictures. It was like, oh yeah, just to prove that they were there when we said they were. Here's thousands of pictures from robots who have literal photographic memories. A little bit of a sloppy job from our scientists.
Not great.
But anyway, yeah. So with that great twist, and I was trying to think, I was like, it feels like a trope where like the person you're assigned to kill becomes your protector. But it's like, I couldn't think of a 1-to-1 comp for that.
I mean, I was trying to think of any specifics. I mean, it is, I don't know. I mean,
right. But it's out there. Like it's not like, it's not like, I've never seen anything quite like that before. But man, it came out of nowhere and blindsided me.
It's not quite a Stockholm syndrome thing because there's a reason why. But the idea that the person you're out to kill is now your only hope of staying alive. Yeah, I can't believe my mind's going blank on the pop culture references right now. I guess that well's tapped for the moment, but. I'm sure
that's the problem of recording in the mornings.
As soon as we end this call, I'm sure I'll be in the shower and 15 things will jump to mind. But as of right now, I can't think of any specifics. But you know that's a story trope and a story beat that happens. You know, the idea of enemies to friends or enemies to protectors, that sort of thing, that happens all the time. And I think it's deployed well here because we have someone who, for all intents and purposes, Adolf is just. He's the worst. He's on the far lunatic fringe of his beliefs and being thrown into, again, with a specific robot that he carries a specific beef with, so it's not just any robot he has to deal with. It's this one specifically, to the point where they even think that it was intentional, like he thinks it's intentional, right? That, they put him on there on purpose because of what he did to my brother, with the idea that I think we, the reader, know that as far as we know, Gazit knows nothing about his brother, at least his supposed involvement with his brother. Right. And so it's just it feeds into Adolf's paranoia, really.
Yeah. It reinforces it. And clearly he thinks Gazit's memory includes everything with his brother, and Gazit's just playing coy or dumb.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
because as we talked about last week, the robots have memories. They don't, they remember everything. And so why wouldn't this guy, he should know everything, and Adolf doesn't know any different, because that's what robots do.
Well, that's what I think it's Dr. Hoffman says, that's basically the core difference between robots and humans, that, humans forget.
Yeah. Sometimes, and to the point where like they can choose to forget things, or they do forget. Yeah, that's what makes you human, and what robots have that perfect memory. And of course, we know that, we the reader know that Gazit doesn't have that because someone could tamper with it, but he's being told it hasn't been. But again, Adolf has no reason to think that. So it would just enrage him more that Gazit is here acting like nothing is the problem, when in Adolf's mind, he's on edge enough already. His paranoia, I guess, really isn't paranoia. On some level, someone is actually after him. But the other level of paranoia, specific around Gazit, is being fed by the fact that he's suspecting something out of Gazit that Gazit is completely unaware of. Something that this is a situation that's only in Adolf's head, that Gazit is completely unaware of until right at the end of Volume 4.
Yeah. Cole, anything else from you on volumes 3 and 4?
I don't think I've got any more notes on these. I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah, same.
All right. Well, with that, we will leave it to everyone listening who, feel free to comment on, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, wherever we are. Either comment at Storied Arcs or Tankobon, or tag us both, and let the the internet debate begin. Always a place for productive dialogue.
That never goes wrong.
Yeah. In the meantime, you can find all the links for the Storied Arcs podcast and the Tankobon podcast in your episode description. StoriedArcs.com will also have a page for Pluto, which will also have links for Tankobon, so you can find us all. Subscribe, listen, share with a friend, give both podcasts a 5-star rating. Special thanks again to Cole for sitting in with us, and we will see you next time for volumes 5 and 6, which are chapters
32 to 47.
32 to 47.
32 to 47. I knew everyone except me knew it. So thank you for the pinch hit there, and we will see you all next time. Thanks for listening.
Peace.